Your foreign minister just spent 8 hours talking to the Americans. He steps out. He smiles for the cameras and calls it a good start. But as he's shaking hands, 7,000 miles away in Washington, D.C., a pen is touching paper. Exactly at the same moment, the talks ended. The U.S. State Department dropped a hammer, not a floral bouquet, but a brutal list of new sanctions. 15 entities, 2 individuals, and 14 oil tankers. Wiped off the legal map. You see the paradox? This is the Muscat gambit. In the world of Donald Trump, a seat at the table doesn't mean the pressure has stopped. It means the pressure is just getting started. Mainstream media says diplomacy is back. I say the trap is closing. They aren't negotiating for peace. They are negotiating for the terms of surrender. And the most dangerous part? Iran actually thinks they have a choice. To understand why this meeting sent shockwaves through the globe, you have to look at the faces who actually walked through those palace doors. This wasn't your typical State Department field trip. Hit the rewind button to 48 hours ago, as the private jet touched down in Oman. The man stepping onto the tarmac wasn't just Steve Witkoff, the official special envoy. Standing right behind him was Jared Kushner. Now, ask yourself, why as a private citizen? The president's son-in-law, with no official government title, sitting at the highest stakes table in the world? The answer is ghost diplomacy. Kushner isn't there to read legal briefs. He's there because he holds the keys to the Abraham Accords and the personal cell phone numbers of the Gulf's most powerful kings. His presence is a silent scream directed straight at Tehran. This isn't a debate about procedures. This is a negotiation about your survival. But here is where the story gets even darker. Standing next to the deal-makers was Admiral Brad Cooper, a top commander from CENTCOM. Think about the mechanics of that room. On one side of the table, you have the architect of the world's most powerful private deals. On the other side, you have the general who controls the decisive systems. The United States didn't come to Muscat to hear complaints. They didn't come to hear about the economy. They came to draw a final line. On the opposite side, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araki walked in, hoping to resurrect a nuclear deal, a deal that has been dead for 10 years. He wanted to talk about uranium percentages. The Americans wanted to talk about ballistic missiles and the collapse of the proxy network. 2 different worlds collided in Muscat, while the Omani diplomats tried to keep the tea warm and the voices low. Out in the Gulf, the USS Abraham Lincoln was turning its bow toward the coast. The message was clear. In this game, the handshake is just a courtesy. The pressure is the point. You have to understand the Iranian mind. For 20 years, Tehran has played a specific game. They call it the negotiation cycle. Under Obama, under Biden, the pattern was always the same. Iran escalates. They spin the centrifuges faster. They provoke. The West gets nervous. The West offers a seat at the table. And the moment Iran sits down, the pressure stops. To the Iranian leadership, the negotiation table was a sanctuary. It was a time-out in a high-stakes game. They believed that as long as diplomats were talking, the warships would stay back, the sanctions would pause, and the economic oxygen would keep flowing. They saw diplomacy as a tactical shield, a way to breathe, a way to reset. They looked at Muscat and saw a repeat of the past. They thought they could trade talks for time. But they made a fundamental error in analysis. They treated Donald Trump like a diplomat. They should have treated him like a hostile acquirer. In this new era, talking isn't a pause button. It is a distraction. While Iran was busy preparing their talking points, Washington was busy preparing the execution. Tehran walked into Muscat expecting a sanctuary. They found a kill zone. How do you break a regime without firing a single bullet? You don't just close the doors. You suck the oxygen out of the room. This is the cold machinery of maximum pressure 2.0. Think of the Iranian economy like an engine. To run, it needs oil. To sell oil, it needs ships. But the world's legitimate tankers won't touch Iranian crude. So Tehran built a shadow fleet. Hundreds of aging, rusted vessels operating under ghost flags, hiding in the dark. But here is the trick. The Americans aren't just watching with satellites anymore. They are using AI-driven financial forensic tools. While the diplomats in Muscat were sipping tea, the U.S. Treasury was performing a digital execution. They didn't just target the ships. They targeted the atmosphere around them. First, the digital ghosting. They identified 14 specific tankers. By blacklisting them, these ships became international pariahs. No legitimate port will let them dock. No company will sell them fuel. Second, the insurance kill switch. In maritime law, a ship without insurance is a billion-dollar liability. The moment the U.S. label hits, European and Asian insurers pull the plug. These ships are now one mechanical failure away from disaster, a disaster that no one will pay for. Third, the secondary siege. This is the genius of the mechanic. The U.S. didn't just tell Iran they couldn't sell oil. They told the buyers, mostly small, private refineries in Asia. If you touch that oil, your own bank accounts will be wiped out of the global system. You see, it's a pincer movement. On one side, you have the military hard power of the carrier group. On the other, you have the soft power of the U.S. dollar. Iran thought they could use the Muscat talks as a shield to keep the oil flowing. They thought the Americans wouldn't dare escalate, not while the cameras were rolling. They were wrong. The Americans used the meeting as a distraction to tighten the noose. While the foreign minister was talking about mutual respect, the U.S. Treasury was cutting off their economic oxygen, one tanker at a time. Why did the Muscat gambit catch them so off guard? Because historically, diplomacy requires a cooling-off period. Usually, you stop the sanctions to start the talks. You lower the temperature to build trust. But this time, the temperature didn't just stay high. It hit the boiling point while the microphones were being set up. This is the simultaneous strike doctrine. Washington didn't wait for the meeting to fail. They assumed the meeting was just a formality. In the past, the U.S. Treasury and the State Department moved in sequence. Diplomacy first, penalties second. Not anymore. Now, the timing itself is the weapon. By dropping the hammer during the handshake, the U.S. destroyed Iran's internal communication loop. Think about the chaos. The negotiators in Muscat are telling their leaders, "We are making progress."
At the same second, the port authority in Asia is telling those same leaders, "Your ships are gone." This creates a crisis of reality. Who do you trust? Your diplomats or your bank account? This isn't just a policy change, it is psychological warfare. It turns the Iranian delegation into ghosts. If they can't protect their own fleet while sitting in the Sultan's palace, What power do they actually have? The cooling-off period is dead. It has been replaced by the total friction strategy. This is where the story turns, from a thriller into a brutal lesson in timing. In diplomacy, timing is everything. Usually, you don't punch someone while asking them to dance. But the Trump administration just rewrote the rule book. Exactly at the moment the Muscat talks were wrapping up, literally as the ink was drying on the meeting notes, Washington dropped the hammer. They didn't just issue a vague warning. They released the names. The Lady Sophia, the Abyss, the Crystal Rose. 14 specific iron giants. Until that second, they were the secret ATMs of the regime. Think about the irony. Minister Abbas Arachi walked out to the microphones. He told the world the talks were constructive. He was trying to signal to the markets. He wanted the war risk to be over. He wanted the price of oil to stabilize. And then the notification hit his phone. While he was talking about peace, the U.S. State Department was announcing decisive action against his fleet. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a choreographed humiliation. It was designed to show the Iranian leadership one thing: their seat at the table gives them zero protection. The execution was surgical. By targeting these 14 ships, the U.S. effectively froze over $500 million of crude oil, sitting right now on the water. These ships are now stateless. They are floating ghost stories. They can't go forward to Asia, and if they go back to Iran, they go back empty-handed. You see, the Americans didn't just take the money. They took the narrative. They proved that they can talk with one hand and strike with the other. They forced the Iranian regime to ask themselves, if they can do this to our ships while we're in their palace, what will they do to our facilities when we leave? Here is the single fatal mistake in Tehran's calculus. The Iranian regime is playing by an old rule book. They believe the negotiation table is a sanctuary, a magic shield that pauses the conflict while the lawyers talk. They thought that by showing up in Muscat, they were buying time. They believed the United States was desperate for a diplomatic win, that Trump would hold back the dogs of war just to keep the chairs filled. But you see, they forgot who is sitting across from them. The fatal flaw was the assumption that leverage is built with words. Iran tried to use a classic extortion tactic. We will stop enriching uranium if you stop the sanctions. They punctuated that demand with a drone attack last week. They thought it made them look strong. Instead, it made them look vulnerable. By attacking a U.S. carrier and then immediately asking for talks, Iran handed the hawks in Washington a loaded weapon. They gave the Trump administration the perfect moral justification to act. Tehran's arrogance blinded them to the reality of transactional warfare. In Trump's world, you don't get a reward for stopping a bad behavior. You get punished for ever starting it. Iran viewed the Muscat talks as a way to de-escalate. The Americans viewed the talks as a way to dictate. By the time the Iranian delegation realized the 14 tankers were gone, the trap had already snapped shut. They realized they hadn't brought a shield to the table. They had walked into a room where the walls were already closing in. They wanted a negotiation. They got an ultimatum, wrapped in a handshake. We are entering the most dangerous phase of a conflict, the phase where options collapse, When a regime realizes its shield is gone, when it realizes its shadow fleet is visible to everyone, the room starts to shrink. This isn't just about 14 tankers. It is about the end of flexibility. When a leader has no room to move, they stop playing chess, and they start reacting. This is how massive miscalculations happen. Tehran wanted a controlled escalation. They wanted to poke the bear and get a better deal. But the bear didn't just roar. It locked the cage. When the legal map is wiped clean, when the insurance is gone, when the bank accounts are frozen, the Iranian leadership loses its grip on its own machine. The Revolutionary Guard doesn't care about diplomatic good starts. They care about the $500 million sitting on the water. This creates a vacuum of power. History shows us that when a system becomes this rigid, a single spark, a single nervous finger on a trigger,
can cause a total collapse of the status quo. The U.S. hasn't just sanctioned ships. They have removed Iran's ability to negotiate with a safety net. There is no net anymore, only the water and the sharks. Friday has passed. The diplomats are flying back to their capitals. But the silence in the Persian Gulf right now is louder than Bucky explosion. The Muscat gambit has left Iran with a choice that is no longer of a nuclear physics, but about regime survival. 1. Do they retaliate? If they launch another drone or harass another tanker, they know the F-35s on the USS Abraham Lincoln won't just be intercepting. The systems will move beyond interception. 2. Do they surrender? If they accept the U.S. terms, the regime loses its funding, its power, and its reason for existing. You need to understand, the clock isn't just ticking for a deal. It's ticking for the global economy. As those 14 tankers sit frozen in the ocean, the oil markets are watching. If Iran tries to close the strait in desperation, we aren't talking via price hike. We are talking via global cardiac arrest. Now, I need you to go on the record. Look at the facts. A handshake in Oman, a hammer in Washington, a carrier in the Gulf. What happens next? Go to the comments right now. Type strike if you think the U.S. will escalate decisively. Type fold if you think Iran will sign whatever paper Trump puts down. Or type chaos if you think the shadow war is about to turn very, very bright. The diplomats are done talking. The systems are already in motion. And now, we wait. Let's see who is right.